Animals and humans are becoming one. Literally. Scientists are blurring the lines between human and animal creation, mixing and matching to their desire. Let's check them out. Mammoths are back, and they're as small as mice now. We know that these giant beasts went extinct over 4,000 years ago, but scientists managed to merge their genetics with lab rats, and they are extremely cute. Their hair grows 3 times longer than regular mice and has a wavy look to them. Their whiskers are also adorable and curly. They have also been attempting this with the Asian elephant and connecting their DNA with woolly mammoths, but there's still no word about that yet. 8 edits were created on these mice, giving them the handful of variables that are closely related to the extinct beasts. One scientist stated, "I think the ability to edit multiple genes at the same time in mice, and to do so and obtain the expected woolly appearance, is a very important step." The money spent on this project exceeded $100 million, and the majority of the public felt really off about this. They thought the money could have been spent on something else rather than putting it all towards animal experiments. Although it would be cool to have an actual mammoth come back, researchers state that we are extremely far from that reality. Animals can now photosynthesize like plants. Scientists have finally cracked the code at being able to combine chloroplast, the important component needed for photosynthesizing, by placing it temporarily into animal cells. This experiment has been going on since the 1970s. That's 55 years that they've been at it. The first few experiments they tried doing was injecting chloroplast straight into animal cells to see what would happen. And obviously their bodies rejected them without hesitation. Over time, scientists have begun to perfect the art of combining 2 very different genomes together, but their biggest issue was that the temperature at which chloroplast could survive was much different compared to the inside of an animal. So what they did was that they took chloroplast from a hot spring to try and get past that issue, but instead of injecting it into the animals, they had mixed it into their food. That way the body would be able to easily absorb it better. It actually worked. The animals that they tested this on managed to show the tiniest bit of photosynthesis within their bodies. Although it didn't last long due to the nature of how they went about it, they made an incredible step forward with this. A singular rat arm was created solely through technology and science. Scientists have been attempting to grow limbs, organs, anything that their technology can bring them towards. They have done this with having animals grow human parts to aid in organ transplants, but now they finally reached a nirvana with this incredible next step. With working nerves, muscle, and tissue, they made a replica of a rat's arm. Of course, there are still bits and pieces that they needed to figure out, with one researcher stating, "The composite nature of our parts makes building a functional biological replacement particularly challenging. Parts contain muscles, bone, cartilage, blood vessels, tendons, ligaments, and nerves, each of which has to be rebuilt and requires a specific supporting structure called the matrix." They've gotten very successful when dealing with singular components, such as creating a replica of a patient's veins out of their stem cells. However, when it comes to replicating an entire arm that isn't just veins, it becomes a much more complex process at getting it right. We are slowly becoming closer to the day where you'd be able to lab grow your very own arm. Would you take up the offer? A 2-headed dog experiment was unethically done in the mid-20th century. Experimenting on animals became really serious around this time, with scientists wanting to push the boundaries of how far they could really go with certain experiments despite them being horrible. Polycephaly is already a known mutation that happens naturally in nature, giving animals and humans 2 heads. It is extremely painful, and almost every single time they do not make it past the first couple of weeks. But with this experiment, scientists had manually done it themselves by sewing the heads of 2 dogs together. Specifically in these times as well, there was no anesthesia that we have today. So these dogs sadly went through one of the most horrifying experiments. It was under the guidance of a Russian scientist by the name of Vladimir Demikov, who wanted to prove that such drastic experiments were possible, all for the sake of bettering mankind. Their main goal was to prove organ transplant to such a degree was doable, and potentially being able to control the nervous system. When the public found out, there was a huge uproar about this. People began protesting and new laws were immediately put into place. Human livers created by sheep, body parts being made out of fruits. Scientists have gone above and beyond when it comes to hybrid creations. Let's check them out. Scientists have created mice with only 2 male rodents. For the longest time, procreation was only possible with a male and a female, which is still technically true, but they are slowly starting to close that door even further. The crazy thing about this hybrid creation is that they were able to make it to adulthood. That is extremely rare for crossbreeds to make it that far. It worked and then some. Through this experiment, researchers are now wondering if they're able to make it so that you can inherit more genes from a specific parent rather than 50-50. This tactic is known as imprinting genes, but the process is very delicate because we see in the wild every day the effects it has when genes become messed up. The whole process behind this is very complicated to explain, but required a lot of taking immature egg cells. With these cells, they infused it with male mice DNA and then placed it into another egg. Throughout this process, they went under 20 genetic tweaks to get their desired outcome. The boundaries of this have also been broken when they found out that all the mice were fertile despite them being hybrids. Somebody managed to make ears out of fruit. How would you feel walking around with an apple stapled to your head? In Canada, a scientist managed to make the almost perfect ear molds out of apples. When it comes to reconstruction of the human body, doctors have reported that recreating the ear has always been the hardest part, and so Andrew Pelling took it upon himself to help out with that. Apples have a specific protein called cellulose, which is what gives it that tough exterior, and it was much cheaper to use than rather a 3D printing a model. He took apart the entire cell structure of the apple, leaving it with only that specific component. Once that was done, he then infused mammal cells inside of it. They would sit in this dish for 12 weeks, and over time they took the form of an ear. They look a little clunky right now, but it is an amazing step forward. He apparently said that this was just a stepping stone at the moment, and in the future, he is hoping to make an entire spinal cord out of nothing but asparagus. Would you be willing to walk around with a fruit head? Our goats are turning into spiders. Well, not literally, but they're developing the gene to be able to produce spider silk. No, they can't spin webs or anything like that, but rather it is being found within the milk they produce. The original plan was to use spider silk from the source, but to no surprise, harboring a spider farm produced a lot more cons than pros. Spiders are extremely territorial, so you could see how that played out. But why spider silk? Well, to quote, due to its strength and elasticity, spider silk fiber could have several medical uses, such as for making artificial ligaments and tendons, for eye sutures, and for jaw repair. The silk could also have applications in bulletproof vests and improved car airbags. Animals have been used for these sorts of experiments for the longest time, and goats just happen to be the best one at producing the right outcome. As of today though, the test hasn't been in the work for a long while, and during a specific moment in our lives, the company that created these goats ended up selling them to Montreal. Where they are now, nobody really knows. Sheeps are also able to grow human body parts. We are at a day and age where organ transplants have become such a high demand, and we are struggling to keep up with it. Scientists have come up with this brilliant, weird idea by growing human organs in farm animals. Sheep, pigs, rabbits, and all sorts of wildlife have been growing organs such as livers. They would insert human stem cells into the embryo of sheep and monitor it from there. The research behind this reassured us that the contribution of human cells so far is very small. It's nothing like a pig with a human face or a human brain. The ratio, however, when it came between the sheep and human stem cells was 1 in 10,000 cells. That's not bad at all. However, during the time of this experiment though, animal experiments like this weren't allowed to come to full term due to a lot of ethical and moral issues surrounding this. Not many people were thrilled with the idea of being able to insert animal/human grown organs inside of themselves. But if there was truly nothing else that could save you in the moment, would you do it? Do you have a favorite hybrid experiment you want to share? Let us know down below and I'll be sure to talk about it in the next video.